This is Emily Guy Birken, and you are listening to Deep Thoughts About Stupid Shit. Because pop culture is still culture, and shouldn't you know what's in your head? In today's bonus episode, I will be talking about feminist analysis of pop culture with my sister, Tracie Guy Decker, and with you. Let's dive in.
Have you ever had something you love dismissed because it's just pop culture? What others might deem stupid shit, you know matters. You know it's worth talking and thinking about. And so do we. Come overthink with us as we delve into our deep thoughts about stupid shit.
So, Tracie, we have already kind of talked about a couple of common feminist analyses of pop culture. And so we realized it would probably be a good idea to have a bonus episode where we kind of dig into these things. So if in the future we want to reference something like the Bechdel Test or Mary Sue, we can refer people back to this. Why don't you get us started with an explanation of the Bechdel Test?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks. So the Bechdel Test, named after Alison Bechdel, who actually, I don't know if you know this, Emily, but she and I are both alumni of the same undergraduate institution.
I did not.
Yes, Alison is an OB. And in fact, this test that bears her name was in some ways, in her mind, just like a throwaway moment in her comic strip, Dykes to Watch Out For. Back in the mid-'80s, I believe it was in 1985 was the strip when it first went. So the test is, we ask ourselves about a piece of pop culture literature. Are there at least two female characters? Do they both have names? Do they talk to one another? And is the topic of their conversation something other than boys or men? And it's funny because Bechdel, outside of the specific like comic book fandom that she has, is known exclusively for this feminist test, in some ways to her chagrin. I recently read an article, an interview with her. She's written all kinds of like plays and musicals have been made out of her graphic novels. Like she has this like big career as a creator. And so I was reading this interview with her where the interviewer was like, I think we need to talk about the Bechdel test. And she was like, oh, do we have to? So I think that's I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think it's pretty interesting that this actually really useful kind of shorthand threshold to ask if something crosses that has been so useful. It was just like a throwaway that she was just trying to make a joke in her Dykes to Watch Out For comic book in the 80s. So I think that's really interesting. So, and the test is super useful. You and I talk about it most episodes of Deep Thoughts, I think, because unfortunately, so much of the literature, movies, TV shows that we consume do not pass the Bechdel test. And it is a really, really low bar.
I was trying to think about the movies that I loved as a child, the ones that I watched over and over again, if any of them passed the Bechdel test. Star Wars does not.
No. Nope.
The Princess Bride does not.
No.
Ghostbusters.
No. Does
not. Let's see. Back to the Future, I think, does not. There might be an interaction between Lorraine and her mother.
Yeah.
Back in 1955. And Lorraine does have friends in 1955, but I think they're talking about...
they're talking about boys or they don't talk. They're just like present. Yeah.
The Never-Ending Story does not pass the Bechdel test.
No.
So so much of the culture that I, soaked in as a little baby future feminist, did not pass this very low bar, which I think goes to show how rare it is to have a film with two female characters who are named who talk to each other about something other than men, which is kind of horrifying, but also goes to show how ingrained, first of all, how many screenwriters are men, and how ingrained the generalized misogyny is in our culture.
And even female storytellers, right? Like these are the models we've been given. Mm-hmm. Is the hero's journey. It's not the heroine's.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
which maybe we'll talk about in another bonus episode sometime.
Yes. Which is interesting because we just learned about something called, I think, the Virgin's Promise.
That's right.
Which is the feminine, like, archetype of what the hero's journey is. And it was interesting to me because that tends to be the types of stories I tell in my fiction. And I have been told that I don't have enough conflict.
Right.
Because it doesn't follow the hero's journey. So the other feminist analysis that we have mentioned before, I think we talked about it in our very first episode, is the idea of Mary Sue. That is a term that was coined kind of as a joke by Paula Smith in 1973. Paula Smith was the editor of a Star Trek fanzine, which I delight in the fact that there were fanzines back when you had to put it in an envelope and put a stamp on it to receive it. Like, that's amazing to me. Just how dedicated fandom can be, and how there's something kind of wonderful about that.
I just had a really sacrilegious thought that, like, all of Midrash, which is a Jewish form of Torah interpretation, like Midrash is biblical fan fiction.
I think you're correct. Well, I mean, so much of any fiction is fan fiction, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, as I said to you recently in a text, I think a large portion of Western art history is fan art of the Bible or Greek myth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Oh gosh, I'm just now thinking about, we're still doing it. I've been thinking lately about how Marvel movies and like superheroes are Greek gods.
Yeah. Or Norse gods.
Or Norse gods. And there is so much fan fiction around that is both literal fan fiction, like people are just writing stuff because they want to, but then also like all the different interpretations that you get of, like, there's so many different Spider-Man movies. You know, even when it is greenlit by the studio, it is still a type of fan fiction.
Yeah, even within the canon, it's fan fiction of a sort. Yeah. I totally distracted you with that.
Quite all right.
So you were talking about Mary Sue and fanzines of the Star Trek fanzines of the 1970s.
Yes. So many of the fan fiction writers at the time, and I think this is still probably true, were young women. And Paula Smith was kind of poking fun at the fact that the young women writing this fan fiction would often kind of self-insert into the stories in a way that can feel a little, I want to say ridiculous, but it is not in service to the story. It's not in service to the characters.
Right. It's wish fulfillment for the author as opposed to the integrity of the story.
Yes. So her 1973 parody, which was called A Trekkie's Tale, she had literally Lieutenant Mary Sue, who joins the Enterprise after graduating from a Starfleet Academy, and immediately finds Captain Kirk enamored of her. Is everything she touches is perfect. Like her reasoning is eminently logical, according to Spock. I mean, and so that is really what Mary Sue analysis is supposed to be, when it is a character that does not serve the story, that is like kind of just magically good at everything. It is clearly some sort of self-insert. And as we talked about in the Twilight episode, the problem with the term Mary Sue is that it is used in a very gendered way. Anytime there is a female character who is competent, or anytime there's a female character who could be seen as a self-insert, there's the accusation of, oh, she's just a Mary Sue.
It's not just accusation, it's like it's a dismissal. That there is no validity or worthiness to this entire fiction because that character is Mary Sue.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's a way to dismiss female authored pieces.
Mm-hmm. Well, I haven't seen it because I'm not a huge fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Not that I don't think they're well-made movies. I am just resentful of something that requires me to see 30, 40 movies.
Totally commitment phobic about it. Me too. So I have a couple of the little franchises. I've watched the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise. I've watched the Black Panther franchise, but the bigger picture, I'm with you. I am totally commitment phobic about that whole universe.
As I understand it, the Captain Marvel movie, which is, I think, Brie Larson. So it's Captain Marvel is a woman that constantly people were saying oh, she's a Mary Sue. And I don't have any sense of whether or not this is a good movie, because that started before it even came out. And for instance, my older son decided he wanted to watch all the Marvel movies by himself, but he was looking on Rotten Tomatoes to see which ones were worth watching, because he knows some of them are not as good as others. And he's like, oh, I'm going to skip that one because it's got really bad reviews. I was like, don't pay attention to that, because a lot of that is backlash from people who hadn't even seen it. Just the fact that it's a female-led superhero movie is frightening to people for some reason. Yeah. So I do find the concept of Mary Sue, even though it is used in such a gendered way and can be just pure misogyny, it is helpful to have a term for it rather than saying, I feel like they were writing something to satisfy themselves rather than actually paying attention to what the characters would really do and what would serve the story in a satisfying way for the audience.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to have two words to say that.
Yes.
Yeah. It is interesting, though, as we talked about in Twilight, like self-inserting is something that male authors have been doing for as long as there have been male authors. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to say again out loud that a self-insert can also serve the story. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be the scenario you just described where there's something that feels inauthentic and unsatisfying because of the self-insert. Self-insert can be totally satisfying and authentic to the story for the reader or viewer.
If done well, it can also bring the reader or viewer along.
Right.
So that they also feel like the hero.
Right. Because if the reader or viewer shares any characteristics, or whether it's demographic or psychographic, with you, the author who's written yourself in, then it's easier for them to identify then with that character. So yeah, I think that's worth noting. And like the joke that you told me when we talked about this during our Twilight episode, what do you call a male Mary Sue? A protagonist. So
yep. That kind of brings me to the next analysis that I wanted to talk about, which is, I think it's a relatively recently coined one called Born Sexy Yesterday.
Yeah, I had never heard of this I knew exactly what it meant, but I had never heard it said that way when you first brought it up to me. So let's hear about it.
As far as I can tell, it was coined by Jonathan McIntosh of the Pop Culture Detective Agency. And there's a video he put out explaining it, which I believe is how I first heard of it. So it starts based on the 1950 film that was remade in 1993 called Born Yesterday, where it's this ditzy Vegas showgirl that two men decide to kind of teach. And she actually turns out to be brilliant. She just had never gotten an education before. It's kind of a Pygmalion story, I think. But this trope is that there is, and McIntosh was specifically looking in the sci-fi and fantasy genre. And he recognizes there are older roots to this that are kind of racist and colonialist, because it's about women from outside of like the white Western culture that men encounter.
Oh, interesting.
But specifically in sci-fi and fantasy, because there's a way to magic a woman into being, what she is physically a woman, sexualized as a woman, and has some sort of like major impressive capability that is usually masculine coded. Like she is an excellent fighter, or she does, coding or something.
Super strong.
Yes.
Lilu.
But
Lilu, the
fifth element. And that is like the best example of this. But because she was born yesterday, she has no understanding of A, how attractive she is to other people, B, how the world works,
right?
Or C, what can be expected of people. The reason why I wanted to go talk about this next is because my family does a family movie night once a week. And recently we watched The Fifth Element together as a family. And I've always been very conflicted about this movie because it is fun. It is a fun movie. It is so problematic. And it, like, even as a 19-year-old or 18-year-old when it came out and watching it in the theater, I was just like, this is not okay. Because we've got that Born Sexy Yesterday trope with Lilu. They keep talking about how she is a perfect being. And if they were talking about her mental capacity, her wisdom, her ability to take in new information, her ability to fight, her empathy for other creatures, that would be one thing. But it is always said
Physical.
when she is naked.
Yeah.
And so the idea that Mila Jovovich, who was, I think, 20 at the time, is what female perfection is. And that's not, I mean, she's gorgeous. I mean, yes, absolutely. But like, it's very, very gross. And then meanwhile, Bruce Willis, who plays Corbin Dallas, is, I looked it up. He was close to 40. And I was just thinking about this as we were talking about Mary Sue. Corbin Dallas is very much a self-insert for Luc Besson, because he is good at everything. Like everything he touches, he's good at. He is clearly, you know, inserted in there as a like, oh, I'm going to be the perfect man for this perfect woman, when he's just a guy, you know? And that's part of the Born Sexy Yesterday trope, is that because she has no knowledge of the world, like the first man she meets is so impressive to her.
Mm-hmm.
And it's,
you know, I'm realizing we recently recorded our Wonder Woman episode, and at least in Linda Carter version, like there's an element of that for Wonder Woman, because she enters our world from Paradise Island, and she has this sort of naive wisdom. Like that's part of the trope of this, is that like a naive wisdom, like, why would you do that? Why would you fight people? Like questioning sort of fundamental pieces of human society.
I love that you brought that up, because McIntosh describes Born Sexy Yesterday as profoundly naive yet unimaginably wise.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's it. And
Wonder Woman definitely is that. In the Linda Carter version anyway.
Even the Gal Gadot 2017 one, I'm just thinking of when she sees the baby. And the way she reacts to the world in, it was 1941, I think. Yeah. And that to me is a similar aspect of it. So the thing that in watching The Fifth Element again this time, and Luc Besson wrote that when he was 16. Like he didn't make it until he was in his 40s, but he wrote the story when he was 16.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
Oh yeah. He has written this character who's supposed to be like so strong and like beyond human comprehension in terms of complexity and ability and all of that. And yet she needs the help of some random cab driver to be able to handle things.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you're either one or the other.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that like strong people can't be vulnerable, but just the way her vulnerability is written is entirely a male fantasy, because her vulnerability is fixed by his mouth.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's like a, you know, Snow White, Cinderella, like.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. So now we have Bechdel Test, Mary Sue, Born Sexy Yesterday with their naive wisdom. What else you got on your list?
Okay, so this one I love just because I love the name of it. And then I didn't know until I was doing a little research for this exactly what she meant. But the sexy lamp analysis, which was coined by Kelly Sue DeConnick and based on the Bechdel test. And what she said is, and I think she was in a science fiction fantasy convention, and I think she was talking about books rather than film, but it's useful in any of them. She says, if your female character could be replaced by the sexy lamp from A Christmas Story, like the leg lamp.
The leg lamp. The fragile, yeah. Uh-huh.
And it doesn't change the plot in any way, then you need to rewrite your story.
That's actually a really fun and like quippy way to talk about women as prizes, right? I don't know why the first thing that comes to my mind is The Legend of Zelda, but the game that we played when we were kids.
Princess Peach, yeah.
Like Zelda was just the prize. Princess Peach is just the prize. She's not actually anything else. So she could very easily just be a sexy lamp or
Mm-hmm.
a literal trophy, because that's all
Yes.
she is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this is on my mind because I've been working on this fiction project. I loved the story of Orpheus and Eurydice growing up. For our listeners who aren't familiar with it, this is the Greek myth. Orpheus was a musician who was like gifted by the gods with the most gorgeous voice. He fell in love with a wood nymph named Eurydice. She is bitten by a snake on their wedding day and dies. He sings about his heartbreak and goes into the underworld, is able to convince Hades and his queen Persephone to let Eurydice be alive again. But they tell him that he has to walk back to the upper world with her behind him and never look back until they are back in the sunlight. And depending on the version of the story, you know, she trips and cries out and he looks back without thinking, or he gets to sunlight far before she does without thinking. He turns back. But long story short, he looks back and she's gone from him forever. And then after that, he keeps singing his despair and he's torn apart by, I can never remember their name, but he's torn apart by a bunch of women who are like, why won't you sleep with us? Your singing is pretty. And then his head keeps singing down the river. Anyway, as much as I love that story, my little romantic heart just, oh, a man who would go to the ends of the earth and beyond. I loved that. As I got older, like Eurydice could be replaced by a sexy lamp.
Yeah.
Like she does not have any agency.
Because even at the end, when he loses her, it's because of his action, not hers.
Yes, not because of hers. I find it very useful to look at things with that and like, you know, actually imagine the lamp from Christmas Story in it, because that helps me recognize like why I have some like moments of like, I really like this, but about things that are, you know, that make my romantic heart otherwise sing. The fiction that I'm working on is I'm updating the story as a young adult novel from Eurydice's point of view, where she makes the choice to get bitten by the snake and she makes the choice not to leave with him because Orpheus is a toxic asshole. Instead of it being a romantic story. And I think that, you know, the idea of women as prize is another aspect that happens way too often and is so unexamined. The other common thing that we see is the Manic Pixie Dream Girl.
Yeah, talk to me about that.
Yeah, so that term was coined by, I think, a movie reviewer, but he's a media expert named Nathan Rabin in 2005, after seeing the movie Elizabethtown with Kirsten Dunst. I remember when that movie came out. I know it has Orlando Bloom in it. I never saw it. And the only reason I even remember that it exists is because I know that this guy coined Manic Pixie Dream Girl from this. But the Manic Pixie Dream Girl is the woman who is available, quirky, and her entire job is to get the uptight guy to stop being so uptight. And so she doesn't have a real arc of her own. She doesn't have a personality of her own. She's just a series of quirks. And it's really all about like, she's adorable and she makes him realize that life is worth living, or realize that he doesn't want the high powered job, or whatever it is.
Natalie Portman in Garden State?
Exactly like Natalie Portman in Garden State. That is exactly the example that I was going to use. So, you know, we meet her and she says, have you heard the Shins? It's going to change your life. And like shares the earbuds with him. And like, human beings don't act like that. And it's a kind of cuteness that is so open and non-threatening and undemanding. That is, again, not giving women the fullness of a real inner life. Now, Nathan Rabin has come to regret having coined that term.
Oh, really?
And I have not been able to dig into it as much as I'd like. I think he regrets it because, like Mary Sue, it's used in a sexist way. So any female character is like, oh, she's just a Manic Pixie Dream Girl. But it's another one that's very helpful term to use in recognizing. And it has a lot of overlap with the Born Sexy Yesterday, because so like one of the examples of Born Sexy Yesterday is Splash. Madison is very much a Manic Pixie Dream Girl in Splash. So because she gets him to break out of the prison he's put himself in with the world that he lives in.
It seems to me that Born Sexy Yesterday, the stakes tend to be higher. Both for the the woman and like just the story, at least the examples that we're talking about, the Splash and the Fifth Element, where the stakes to Madison are actually pretty high versus like Portman's character in Garden State. I mean,
it's ultimately just not just a love story. It's ultimately a love story.
But the stakes of her relationship with the Zach Braff character are just their romance. Those are the only stakes. Yeah. Like the world is not ending. She's not going to be like shipped off to a research facility and studied like Madison.
Yeah, I think that's a good analysis because every time I've heard the Manic Pixie Dream Girl described, it's generally in realistic fiction rather than in like sci-fi fantasy or something where there are higher stakes.
I think it's an interesting kind of concept to play with when thinking about like, okay, well, what would it take to move this character out of Manic Pixie Dream Girl into a fully fledged human woman who has agency? What would it take in the story for that to happen? I feel like that's a kind of an interesting concept to have so that we can ask that question.
So the subversion of this trope that I latch onto is from a movie called Liberty Heights, starring Adrian Brody, that came out in 1999. It's set in the 1950s. It's set in Baltimore about a Jewish neighborhood and these interrelated stories. So the Adrian Brody character is absolutely in love with this blonde young woman who is dating someone else who is not Jewish. And so there's some angst about the fact that he's interested in this woman who's not Jewish. And he just pines for her. And there gets to be a point where she breaks up with her boyfriend at a party where Adrian Brody is. And the boyfriend says something along the lines of like, good luck with that one. And so he takes her home and she suggests they go to a motel or something. And she has a complete and utter breakdown. And a lot of the lovely mental health issues that she did not let people see. And so he had gone from really pining for this woman who was this kind of unattainable, gorgeous object to seeing her fully. And I don't remember exactly how it ends. I mean, she ends up crying there and having basically a breakdown. And he's like, what is this? What is this? I don't understand. And I feel like that's a really good subversion of a trope that hadn't even been described yet. It came out 6 years before the trope was first described. But I think about that over and over and over again because that character still doesn't have a full story. Like we just see that Adrian Brody's character's bubble is burst. But we get to see that there is more to this than just what you see on the surface of this like adorable, gorgeous, charming, quirky woman who seems to have all the answers. So
just from your description, it's a little, it feels like sticky in a bad way to me insofar as like, because she's fully human, she's no longer worthy of affection, of pining. Like I haven't seen it, so I'm just reacting to what you said. Yeah, so that may not be a fair analysis, but
it felt a little bit more like not that she wasn't deserving. It was that this was not what he thought was happening. So like he had built up this idea in his head and then he's hit with reality. And it was more than he could handle. Like he was not in a position to be able to help her through whatever this breakdown was.
Because she was a sexy lamb, but it turns out she was actually a human being.
Yes. So like you don't think highly of him after this, but it's not like, oh, you're not worth my time. It's more like I'm over my head. That has stuck with me. I saw that movie 20 years ago. And that moment is one of like 2 or 3 that I can remember from the entire film. So I know you've got a hard stop. So I want to talk about one more analysis that I find very helpful.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's called Fridging Women or Refrigerating Women. Gail Simone, who is, I believe, a novelist, she coined that term in 1994, specifically because of a Green Lantern comic book where the Green Lantern, Kyle Rayner, comes home to find his girlfriend, Alexandra DeWitt, killed and stuffed in the refrigerator.
Ew.
And that event is his inciting incident to take revenge and go off and do all those things.
So this trope is that sort of backstory that of the dead wife and kids and or kids who are the reason that we're now seeing this. Yes. That's a very common trope
very common,
especially in a superhero. That's very common in superhero backstories.
It again reduces, instead of women being a sexy object, it's just an inciting incident object, basically. Like, okay, how are we going to get him to go on a rampage? All right, let's kill off his wife. And it's related to me to one of the things that drives me really nuts in books is when an author wants to show how scary a bad guy is. And they want to raise the stakes. So they info dump a huge amount of backstory of a character you've never met before who's just about to die. And that is, I think, kind of a hack writing technique as a way to raise stakes. And this reminds me of that because it's, instead of like organically finding a way for this character to feel broken and feel the need to go off and do all these things, just like, oh, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, we're going to refrigerate someone he cares about. And if it were something that only happened occasionally, that would be fine. But for instance, I really like the Deadpool movies, but the second Deadpool movie refrigerated Vanessa, his girlfriend. And it's partially because his girlfriend needs to not be in the film for him to be Deadpool, because otherwise he'd just be happy and be Wade, whatever his last name is. That is really frustrating because it's like, why can't you come up with a better way to do that? Why do they have to be unhappy, first of all, to do these things? Or why can't you find a different way to make them unhappy? Or why does it have to be a death?
Right.
You know, why can't she have the agency to like be seduced to the dark side? Or, you know, I don't know, anything.
Or just like take a really good job in California and not take him with her.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I think it comes up a lot. Like just you're saying it, I'm thinking about both sort of fantasy sci-fi, like superhero stuff, but also like Russell Crowe's Gladiator refrigerated his wife.
Mad Max.
Yeah. Like, I think that one's science fiction, but it feels like a very, very common.
Well, John Wick. I don't know if you've seen any of the John Wick movies.
No, I haven't.
It's a little bit different there.
Right?
Yeah, his wife dies, like he retires from being an assassin. His wife dies of natural causes. And so she knew she was dying. And so she arranged for him to get a puppy like the day after her funeral. And someone kills the puppy.
Oh, okay. But it's like a step removed.
It's just like
Refrigerating
one step
by
removed.
proxy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and like a lot of like villains, although I'm thinking about Shang-Chi and the 7 rings.
I haven't
the 10
seen
rings
that one.
and the 10
Yeah.
rings.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like the death of the wife is the inciting incident, but she has a lot more, although it sounds like Vanessa did too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Vanessa's a great character.
Like the wife actually has very much of a full like character. Well, I don't know if she has a full characterization, but she does have agency and
Kingpin's Kingpin's wife in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Mm-hmm.
She has agency because she's running away from him because she's horrified by who she's married to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so so that's not exactly refriging. It's not exactly that. Actually, I would say it's probably not, because she is missing as a direct result of his actions.
Well, except doesn't he bring her back and she doesn't want it?
He brings her back and the same thing happens, because when he brings her back, he's still trying to hurt Spider-Man.
Okay. My recollection was that she had died and then he brings her and she rejects him when she's a zombie, but okay.
No. It's he's using the
other alternate universes.
The alternate universe machine to bring an alternate universe version of her. And it's so that's a great subversion of this. Like it gives us a good background. I actually really liked Kingpin as a villain because there is something very sympathetic about him just wanting the people he loved best in the world back, even though he was a horrible human being. And the single-mindedness with which he was pursuing it was comprehensible as someone who is grieving and doesn't care who he hurts, because he's always been a sociopath, but he was able to hide it with his wife and child. And so like, I think that's really, really well done. Whereas when you have, some of these fridging, it's just like, okay, we've got that out of the way. Now we know why he's doing the crap he's doing. It's similar to how I hate the romantic comedies that start with one character's like sister or brother-in-law or something dying, and so they end up having to take in the kids. Like I feel like that's a similar refrigerating moment, because it's like you are manipulating these characters in a way that is unnatural just so that you can get two people who don't like each other having to raise a kid together or whatever it is. And it's bad storytelling is why it bothers me. But it's also like, I truly believe that we owe something to our characters. And that's why it bothers me when they do the info dump when a minor character is about to die. Like, that character deserved better. Like, they do. We owe something to our characters. They don't exist without us. And so we if we're going to make them suffer, it needs to be in service of something greater than just a story shortcut. So, I mean, I do tend to anthropomorphize fiction.
No.
So that's quite a lot of deep thoughts. I wouldn't call it stupid shit, but it's a lot of deep thoughts.
No.
Do you want to try to synthesize stuff for us?
Sure. Okay. So today we were talking about some tropes that we see, and you grouped these, Emily, specifically around gender. So I hope that we'll be able to do additional bonus episodes around other tropes or archetypes. For instance, we briefly touched on the hero's journey and the Virgin's promise today. Let's dig into those again in the future.
And we've talked a little bit about like the magical Negro trope. And so talking about like tropes surrounding race and other marginalized communities could be really interesting. Because I think it would also be really fascinating to talk about like the gay best friend trope.
Absolutely.
And that sort of thing. Yeah.
So we will get to those in future bonus episodes. Stay tuned. But for now, we talked about the Bechdel test, which gives us sort of a quick and dirty like litmus test around female representation in a piece of pop culture. We talked about the Born Sexy yesterday. Lilu from The Fifth Element is an epitome of that.
She's the poster child.
Mm-hmm. But we're seeing it. We saw it in other, like clearly in other, including Wonder Woman. Mm-hmm. There was the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, who is a collection of quirks to be romanticized and draw our hero out of his shell. Mm-hmm. We talked about the Refrigerated Woman, who is the dead wife or girlfriend from the backstory of our hero or anti-hero or villain, who is the so-called explanation or inciting incident for their behavior. And the one that I missed is Mary Sue, who is a self-insert of the author. And when we talked about it, it was important for us to name that there's nothing inherently wrong with the self-insert. What makes it, actually, this is true, I think, of all of these. Mm-hmm. What makes it problematic is when it is done without care for either the character or the integrity of the story. Mm-hmm. Both of those things are important. And when one or both of them are ignored, it feels false, inauthentic, and then reifies sexism in these cases.
Yes. One other that you missed was the sexy lamp.
Oh, of course. How could I miss the sexy lamp? If the female character could be replaced with a sexy lamp and nothing changes about the story, she is not a fully formed character.
And you should do some rewrites. Well, this has been so much fun. I'm really excited to be doing these bonus episodes, and I will see you next time.
Sounds great.
Hey there, Tracie here. Just a quick note to say I hope you enjoyed this first bonus episode of Deep Thoughts About Stupid Shit. It will not be our last. Moving forward, bonus episodes will exclusively be for patrons. We will do bonus episodes about tropes and analyses like this one, and also about somewhat more obscure pieces of pop culture like the monster at the end of this book. featuring lovable furry old Grover. Head on over to our Patreon, link in the show notes, if you're interested in getting all the bonus content. Thanks for listening. Our theme music is Professor Umlaut by Kevin MacLeod from incompetech.com. Find full music credits in the show notes. Deep Thoughts is a labor of love, but that doesn't make it free to produce. You can help keep us overthinking. Support us through our Patreon with a link in the show notes. Leave a positive review so others can find us. And share the show with your people. Until next time, remember, pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head?